Welcome back, Richard. I'm going to start it off with my arm is a little bit sore, but I got my vaccine, my first vaccine shot 2 days ago.
Which one? Which vaccine?
I got the Pfizer.
You have Moderna arm from a Pfizer vaccine.
Yeah, it was, it's not too bad. I mean, I was able to, I have friends who got it as well and had difficulty lifting the arm above their shoulder. But yeah, mine was okay until I started to change the sheets on my bed, and it was like lifting the mattress to check the stuff. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, then I can feel that. But otherwise, all is well.
But it's comforting to start getting those, isn't it?
It is. I go back in 3 weeks and get the second shot, and then we'll see there. But so yeah. There's a lot of people getting the vaccines, and that's so fantastic. So hopefully we're turning the corner. Hopefully
the end, as Winston Churchill may have said, we are at least at the end of the beginning.
That's right.
Of getting this under control.
That's right, because at least still at least what 30% of Americans say that they're not going to get it. So
many are not going to get it, and we just hope that there's almost this foot race between the vaccine mutation and people not getting back. People who don't get vaccinated, regardless of the reason, become the host for the mutation. That's where it will mutate. So the more people who don't get vaccinated, the more likely it is that the vaccine will mutate, and then not the vaccine, the virus will mutate. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, as always, it's the good of the people versus the good of the individual.
Right. Absolutely. So, but you know what? We weren't going to talk about COVID today. We're going to talk about we're going to talk about parenting and teaching a little bit today. We're going to talk about a system, I suppose, an approach to behavior management called response cost.
Right.
And this is a very common, broadly used approach to managing behavior based upon behavioral theory. And, basically when we think about behaviorism, we're thinking about two things. We want to either reinforce a behavior or increase the likelihood that it will happen again, or we want to punish a behavior and decrease the likelihood that it will happen again.
Right.
And we can do that through either positive ways or negative ways. Positive ways means you're giving something to either increase the likelihood or decrease the likelihood of a behavior, or we can do it in negative ways, means we're taking away something to either increase or decrease the likelihood of a behavior happening.
Right.
So we have these two approaches, and response cost is often tied to a positive reinforcement, which means that they're getting something to encourage a behavior. But the response cost portion is what you would call a negative punishment, if you will, where you're taking away something that the kid wants to decrease the likelihood that they'll do a behavior again. So that's like if you take a toy away from your child for hitting someone with it. So they're playing with a train, they hit somebody with it, you take the train away. So you're taking away something that they want so that they don't hit again. So that's response cost.
Right. Yeah. At a practice level, what we see day in and day out is, well, my daughter lied to me, so I had to take her phone. Or my son was on the internet, and so I had to take his phone. Okay. And what the parents are doing is they're simply using one of dozens of strategies that are meant to change people's behavior. I mean, in this case, they're taking something of value to try to reduce the behavior from occurring again, reduce the likelihood that behavior will occur again. But parents don't really, I mean, they're doing sort of this common sense, intuitive approach to child rearing. And they don't realize it's response cost, but that's what it is. And we've been troubled by this. I know as clinicians, we've been troubled by this for a long time because we keep thinking, well, you're taking her phone, but the phone has nothing to do with the behavior. You
Right.
know, she's not lying because she's not lying to you because she has a phone. Okay, so you're tying something that has nothing to do with the behavior. So it's always bothered me a little bit. And then I thought, well, what parents are doing is they're kind of using response cost, a form of response cost, but they're not using it completely.
Right.
And it's not really working for them. And it's not working because it's not being used effectively.
Right.
So this whole idea of response cost is a very common approach. We experience it every day. If you park in a no parking zone, you get a ticket. If you exceed the speed limit, you get a ticket. So the government is taking something away to reduce the likelihood that you'll do it again. Driving under the influence.
Right.
You're going to lose your driving privileges if you don't stop this behavior. So that's kind of, I mean, response cost is everywhere. Now, but response cost is also a coin that has two sides.
Right.
On one side is what we call grandma's rule.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat your vegetables, you get dessert.
Premack.
Right. And it's funny that a husband and wife team, I mean, grandma's rule was probably in effect in 1750. But after in the 1970s, a husband and wife team by the name of Premack studied grandma's rule in a laboratory,
Mm-hmm.
and it became known as the Premack Principle. Well, my grandmother never heard of the Premack Principle, but I can assure you she used, if you eat this, you get dessert. You know, you have to eat your dinner and then you get dessert.
Absolutely. And you know, anybody who has ever had a job and you got paid for that job, for the most part, that's pretty much
Grandma's rule.
you have
Right.
something that you're not really prone to do, work,
Right.
and then for working, you get something that you want, money.
Right. So grandma's rule is if you do something desirable, you get a treat, you get a reward.
Mm-hmm.
Response cost is if you do something that's undesirable or illegal or
Right.
whatever, then we take something from you.
Right.
Okay. So think of it as a two-sided coin. One is do this, you get something, do this, and we're going to take something away. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where the punishment comes in. The word punishment is simply, for behaviorists, it's simply reducing the behavior.
Right.
Okay? Reinforcing is increasing the behavior, punishing is decreasing the behavior.
Right.
As it turns out, and I know that many parents struggle with this notion of, well, I take her phone, or I take the car keys, or I shut down the internet, or do these things, it just doesn't seem to be working. And they get frustrated and they say, well, nothing works. I guess my kid must need medicine, or my child is really bad, or something's really wrong. No, it's just that the technique,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a laboratory technique, is how it's used. Right. I mean, this is used in a laboratory setting, but when it's used in our homes, we don't use it in the correct way. So, but as it turns out, response cost is the most popular behavior management strategy that there is.
Sure.
It's not the only behavior management strategy. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of other strategies you can use, but it is the most popular. It's what everybody reaches for.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. And it's part of that is because it tends to be part of something that's called that, you know, we're talking about it officially. It's called a token economy, right? So if you do something we want, we give you something. If you do something we don't want, it costs you something. And so it's on one side you have Premack Principle or Grandma's Rule, where you do something we want you to do, you earn something. That's
Right.
positive reinforcement. And if you do something we don't want you to do, it costs you something. And so it's part of this natural economy that is often used, very often used in classrooms, in homes,
Right.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's commonly used in schools. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about response cost is a generation or two, I guess I'd go back I don't know, am I 2 generations ago? A generation or 6 ago, response cost was much easier to use.
Right.
Okay. And this is another thing that parents need to be aware of.
Right.
When you and I were growing up, if our parents didn't want us to watch the TV, it was really simple. You just pulled the plug, or I mean, that was the only device in the house. Okay. There was a TV. Okay. Same with a telephone.
Mhm.
A telephone was either attached to a plate on a wall, or it was sitting on a piece of furniture plugged into a wall. But that was it. It might have a long cord that you could take it around the corner, but the device itself was stationary.
But
Okay.
there was no sneaking it.
There was what?
There was no sneaking it.
No, you couldn't put a phone in your pocket.
Right.
You couldn't put it in your pocket and walk out the door. Okay. None of these things were portable. I mean, a TV, you couldn't take it. You can't do that today. Okay.
Yeah, typically there were only one, maybe two TVs in the house.
That's right. And it was easy to control their use. I mean, so, but today, if you take your child's phone, if you say, well, I'm going to do response cost, I'm going to take my child's phone, well, they'll just borrow one from a friend.
Right.
Mm.
Or they go on their use their iPad, or
They-
they'll
they use-
say, that, well, I have to have some connection to the internet to do homework. You want me to
Right.
do homework? How can I do my homework if you take my phone?
Mhm. Right. So, try to stop a teenager from accessing the internet.
Right.
They're gonna if a teenager wants to access the internet, they're gonna access the internet. And there's almost nothing that a parent can do except shut everything down, take it all out of the house, shut down the internet, not have it come into your house. It's those kinds of draconian approaches. But if you do that, there's going to be a lot of emotion in your house. You won't have an internet, but you're going to have emotion.
Right. And the other part of it is that makes it much more difficult now is that kids aren't well versed anymore in entertaining themselves, and parents are very frustrated by that. So what happens is they take their phone away, and now the kid has nothing to do.
That's right.
Or they take the internet or the electronic, we'll just say their electronics away, and now they have nothing to do. And the parent says, well, you need to find something to do. Well, there is nothing, and in part, it's not the kid's fault. There's nothing else in their world for them to do.
In our world, we watched TV, we played outside. There were just a handful of things that we could do.
Right.
I mean, there was a limited number of things we could do. We didn't have access to the internet. We didn't have access to the world of information. This cornucopia of stuff that kids can do today. We had a limited number of items, and if your parents took away one of those, you were really in a very small box.
Right. But we were versed in finding that those other things to do because we knew what they were. And I know that you've had this experience as well. And because it blows my mind when parents will say, well, I took his electronics away and he just needs to find something to do. I said, well, what would you like for him to do? Maybe you could encourage him to go outside. Oh, no, he's not allowed to go outside by himself.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe he could, do this in his room. Oh, no, you can't just leave him in his room because there's this in his room. And then if you leave him in there, he's going to do that. So, okay, so what do you want him to do?
Right. That's right.
You don't want him, underfoot all the time. You don't want him complaining to you and, nagging you all the time because you took his phone away or you took his electronics away. But there is nothing else there for him.
Right. That's right.
And then parents give in.
Right. And what you're doing is you're taking a kid from this hothouse environment where they have access to the whole internet to nothing.
Right.
Okay. For me, it was, I'm able to do 3 different activities. You're taking one of them. Okay. I can live with the other 2. Okay. So today,
right.
If you take a child's phone, when I lost TV time, that's all I lost.
Right.
The rest of my life was intact. I lost TV time.
Right.
I got the message. Okay, you did something wrong, so you don't get to watch TV, or you get grounded. Okay, for a weekend. Okay. If my daughter loses her phone, if I take my daughter's phone, she loses everything.
Right.
Her whole life is my entire life wasn't in the TV.
Right.
My daughter's entire life is in her phone. So you're taking something that is far more consequential than the car keys,
Right.
far more consequential than when I was put on restriction or I was not allowed to watch TV for a couple of days. Okay.
Right.
And you have to remember that what you're taking today is far more consequential.
Right.
And you might say, well, then it ought to work. It ought to, but it doesn't.
Well, and part of the reason that it doesn't is because, as you rightfully said a few minutes ago, typically speaking, it has nothing to do, the phone has nothing to do with what caused the problem.
What the child is doing, right?
If she's talking back to you and being quote unquote disrespectful
right.
or rude, that has nothing to do with her cell phone.
Right.
So,
and you say
isn't going to make that connection for her.
Yeah, and invariably, parents will say, well, she really wants her cell phone. And so if I want her to stop being disrespectful, I'll take that cell phone because that's the most important thing in her life, and she'll stop being disrespectful.
Right.
I don't know that it might work with some children, but it's not going to work with 20% of children. It's not going to work well with kids with ADHD.
Sure.
It's not going to work well with kids with impulse control disorders. It's not going to work well with kids who have other kinds of problems in their lives, okay? It just doesn't work well with them.
Right.
And the problem with response cost, the way most people use it, is we're using it, it's a reaction rather than a plan.
Right.
If you go to a behaviorist, if you go to an ABA specialist and you say, I would like for you to reduce this child's behavior, they will sit down and develop an entire plan. It's very carefully thought out. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is our goal. This is what we're going to take away. This is what we're going to add. It's a very carefully developed plan. Right. When most parents use response cost, it's simply a reaction to undesirable behavior.
Right.
You were mouthy, I'm going to take your phone. That's not response cost.
And it's
response cost is a plan.
And the parents' use of it is usually driven by emotion.
And they do it when they're angry.
Yeah.
Okay. It's usually not just a reaction, it's usually an emotional reaction. And it's meant to inflict pain, some kind of pain, emotional pain.
Which I think is so disappointing, to just use a ridiculous word. It's disappointing that the parent, because we hear it all the time. Well, I want her to feel this.
I want her to hurt.
It's serious. I want her to be hurt by this. And
right.
Parents will say it time and time again that there's nothing else that will hurt her like taking her phone away.
Right. Right.
And it's sort of the verbal or emotional spanking.
Right? That's exactly what I compared it to. It's like spanking. It's like, how can I get the quickest response? Hit somebody. Spank somebody.
Right.
It's not effective.
Right. So if you don't spank or hit them, you just take their devices, or you impulsively remove that.
Right. You're angry because they're being disrespectful. So in your anger, you say, I want to hurt you back. You've hurt me. I'm going to hurt you back. And I'm going to hurt you in the most, what I believe is the most effective way possible. And I'm going to take the most valuable item in your life, and that's your phone. Right. It's emotional analog to a spanking, to a slap in the face.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to hurt you as much as I can. And
the real challenge to it is, and the reality of it, I suppose, that parents and teachers should hear is that, the way that most people are using it is that there is no positive aspect to it. There's no learning aspect of it. I remember working with a parent, and the parent was doing a really good job of making some connections with behavior and actions. And so the parent noticed that there was a relationship between the amount of time their son played online video games on their Xbox with being disrespectful and being confrontational and being argumentative with the parents. And so the parent wanted to impulsively just take the Xbox away and say, well, you can't play this anymore because you're being rude and stuff. Well, but we talked about it, and instead of doing that, what we did was we talked to the kid and said, hey, look, man, there is this connection. Your mom is noticing that the more you're playing online with your friends, the more likely you are to be rude and confrontational and argumentative with your mom. So it looks like your Xbox is making it to where you're talking, the way that you're using your Xbox is making it to where you're being this way to your mom.
Right.
So you sort of have a choice. You can continue to what you're doing and have your Xbox removed and taken away from you, or you can think about what's happening and fix the way that you're talking with your mom. So it's a very similar way to use the response cost to what the way the parent is, but it's a plan. We created a plan and informed the kid of what the expected behavior was, what the unacceptable behavior was, and he fixed it. He addressed it. He was still playing his game the way that he was, but you could see him starting to pause before he reacted. And so, because he wanted to be mindful, he didn't want to lose his Xbox. And so nobody got angry, nobody got really mad or anything. And so it was an effective use of, or potential use, I guess, of a response cost with a more positive outcome.
That's right. And when we talk about a plan, when we talk about a response cost technique, there's always a positive aspect to it. It's not just taking something, it's taking something, but there's also a way for the child to earn it back, to get it back, to learn and get it back and be rewarded for the positive behavior. Okay. Absolutely. But when you just take something from a child, and that's all you do, kids know that it's meant to punish, it's meant to hurt. And that creates an adversarial relationship between a parent and a child. It's not, they're not angry with you. I don't think that most kids are angry because they're missing their phone. I think they're angry because they know that all you're trying to do is hurt them. You're just trying to inflict some pain here.
Right. And I think that one of the common things that I hear, and I would be interested to hear if you hear the same thing, is that kids will say it's not fair.
Yeah. Right.
And parents will say, well, it's not meant to be fair, or life isn't fair. You know, we say those those things that if our kids said it, we would take their phones away. But it's the idea that the consequence doesn't match the behavior that it was used for, and kids know that. You know, kids as young as 8 can put those things together, and so it does create. I mean, it's a prime spot for animosity and aggravation and just adversarial tendencies to pop up and to really, infiltrate the family and create a lot of conflict.
Right. And the battle, this battle that begins to emerge between a parent and a child over taking the phone. And you're right, it's out of proportion to what happened. You know, the kid was a little mouthy, and you take their phone, you take their life. You're not taking their phone, you're taking their life. Okay. And it's not in proportion to the crime that they committed. But parents will often say, well, that's how you teach them a lesson. You know, you inflict enough pain and they'll get it. No, if you inflict that kind of pain, you're going to damage your relationship. And when we talk about these behavioral techniques, they all begin with a positive relationship. If you don't have a good relationship with your child, none of these things are going to work very well. They might work, but they're going to work for all the wrong reasons, and you're going to damage your relationship, and it's going to have lasting effects on your relationship with your child. They all begin with a good relationship.
Absolutely. And when parents say that, the thing that I always respond with is, well, that's great. And so you probably only had to do that one time. You probably only had to take their phone one time then, right? And they say, oh no, I have to take I have to take it all the time. Okay, so what lesson are they learning? Right. If you have to take it multiple times, then clearly they're not getting the message.
Right.
We can say that the message is sent loud and clear. We can say that I could even allow the parent to argue that it's a good message to send. I don't think it is, but we could argue that. Yet the kid isn't getting the message. And so what are we going to keep sending the same message in the same way, even though we know it's not being heard and being received? Or are we going to find a new message to send?
Right. That's right. That's right. And we always want to be teaching something. We always want to be instructive. As parents or teachers or spouses, we want to be teaching all the time, teaching our kids what we want them to do, not punishing them for what they are doing. So the negative aspects of response cost are that, and this happens day after day after day, when parents rely on taking things, when that's your, well, by darn, I'm going to just keep taking things until he gets it right. Okay. They're never going to get out. They're never going to earn their way out of it. You're always going to be taking and taking and taking. And it's just not doing anything. And I have many families who say, well, once again, she did this. And so, well, we can't give her computer back because she did it again this week. And they do it week after week after week. If you're doing it week after week after week and your child's not getting the message, then I think we have to start thinking of using one of the other approaches.
Right.
Okay. There are many other approaches to you. It's not that there's something wrong with you or there's something wrong with your child. You're using the wrong tool.
Right.
You don't use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail. Okay. You're just using the wrong tool. There's probably nothing more wrong than that. So pick up a different tool.
Absolutely. And so, in light of what you were saying, you have to make sure that the ratio is balanced between positive and negative. So, for every time you use response costs, you take something away, there's some variability in how many positives should go with each negative. At least 3. And, if you want the student, the kid or your child or your student to make gains, there has to at least be 3 positives to every negative.
Right.
In our book, we wrote 5 to 1. Because that's really building the kid. That's not just allowing them to make progress. You're really building the kid's confidence, and you're building their emotional sense of self with a 5 to 1, but at least 3 to 1. So every time every negative, you have to have at least 3 positives.
Right. A good example is chores. Many parents complain their kids don't do their chores or they don't do them well. And so you have a recurring cycle where kid doesn't do his chores, so the parents take something away. Well, he didn't do his chores, so got to take his computer. Okay. So you've taken something away. That's the negative. Now what you have to do, and this is when we talk about a plan. Now what you have to do is, what can I do to get my son to do his chores? What are things that I can do to get him to do his chores? We know what we're doing when he doesn't do his chores, but that's only half the issue. The other half is, what do I need to do in a positive way to get him to do his chores? Okay. It's not bribing, it's encouraging the right behavior. So you have to have, the problem with response cost is when parents use it, they're just taking away and they're leaving out this, what do I do to get the behavior that I want? They're leaving out the positive part.
And when they do give it back to their kids, because they typically do, it's a very uneventful.
Right.
Okay, here, you can have your phone back. Okay.
Nothing has changed. Right.
Nothing has changed. We're not going to talk about what happened. We're not going to, we're not going to give any celebration that, hey, man, you did a great job over the last couple of days of not talking to me in that rude way that you were before. Right. So I really appreciate it. So, you can have your Xbox back. And
a perfect example is, okay, I'm going to take your phone for a month. Taking the phone for a month is step 1. If you don't do anything else, nothing has changed.
Right.
All you have shown is that as your mother, I can hurt you. I can hurt you in the most hurtful way that there is, I will take the most valuable thing in your life and I will keep it for a month.
Mhm.
But if I don't teach you to do what I want you to do, then you're only taking the first step
Right.
and you're leaving everything else out. And that's the problem with response cost
Right.
is that parents, it's not a plan. It's just simply a reaction.
Right. And
Right?
the other piece to that is that we're not, again, there's no connection between what you're wanting and how you're punishing.
Right.
And so, you know, if you're taking my phone away because I'm talking rude to you,
Mhm.
by taking my phone away, that does not in any way interfere with my ability to talk rude to you.
Right.
I can still talk rude to you.
Right.
And in fact, now I don't have my phone, so I have nothing to lose.
I have nothing to lose.
So I can just keep talking rude to you if I want.
Not only that, but I can go to my friends and get an old phone and reactivate it, and I've got access.
Right.
So you haven't hurt me.
Right.
I mean, you.
So we're not we're relying on your kids' fear of punishment
Right.
as a way to manage behavior. And my goodness, I don't know about those of you listening to this podcast, but I don't want my kids' behavior to be governed through a fear of avoidance of punishment.
Fair. Right.
I want my kids to behave and to make good choices and good decisions in their life because they know that they're the good choices and good decisions that they should be making, not
Right.
because they're fearful of going to get a punishment.
Right.
I don't want you to drive the speed limit because if you don't, you're going to get a ticket. I want you to drive the speed limit because that's what's safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have deemed appropriate for
Right.
that stretch of road. That's the appropriate speed to be driving to
Right.
avoid hazards and everything. So we're not teaching that though. When we use response costs in this emotionally reactive way, we're not teaching our kids what it is they need to learn so that when we're not there, we go back to this often in this podcast, we want them to behave when we're not there.
Exactly.
And if
Right.
we're not teaching them that, then they're going to continue to make these decisions when they think they can get away with it.
Right. Yep. And the other thing is, if you rely on just taking things, you're never going to get where you want to be. We in our business, we call it a replacement behavior.
Yeah.
What do you? What's your? Whenever I talk to a parent and they say, "Well, if she doesn't do her chores, then I remove this." Okay, that's step one. And my next question is, okay, so how are you teaching her to do that chore? What are you doing to get her to do that chore? And most times I'm not doing anything.
Right.
So the problem with response cost is that it's usually an emotional reaction and you're taking something because the child did something you don't want the child to do. Okay?
Absolutely. So
Right.
so we'll give an example with that example. We can walk it through and help parents understand how to use it. So your daughter is on her phone. She's supposed to be washing the dishes.
Right.
But she's on her phone and she's texting with her friend and she's not getting the dishes done. A parent's reaction is, give me your phone. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. That's it. You lost it for a week. Right. How many times do I have to tell you? Very common. Usually it's not just for not washing the dishes. It's usually like for not cleaning your room or something. Instead, you can say, look, I've asked you a few times to wash the dishes. I see that you keep texting your friends. Washing the dishes takes 5 minutes. Give me your phone. I'm going to hold on to it for 5 minutes because clearly it's too difficult for you to stay away from it. Give me your phone. I'll hold it until you finish washing the dishes. After you finish washing the dishes, I'll give it back to you. No harm, no foul.
Right.
All right? We taught the replacement behavior. We communicated that, hey, I can see that what's interfering with you meeting your responsibilities is your phone.
Right.
I will remove that distraction for you because you're unable to do it on your own. I will hold on to it, and then you can have the distraction back after you're done with your meeting your expectations. There's no animosity there. There's not a lose-lose because that's what animosity creates, right? The dishes get done. She gets her phone back.
Everybody's happy. Right.
Nobody's upset. Everything is fine.
Dishes get done, and I have my phone.
Right.
Win-win. Yeah.
So it's all the same thing. but there's a plan there.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I think that that's the recurring theme here is we have to have a plan.
Right.
We can't just throw it out there whenever we want to.
Right.
Because especially when we throw it out there whenever we want to, that emotional reactive, that makes it also makes it inconsistent.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Or I say, I'm going to take your car. I'm going to take the car for a month. You can't drive for a month. And within a few days, you realize that everybody in the family is getting punished. So you give the car back in 3 days
Right.
because now somebody else has to do the driving for a month.
Right. Or with that other example, she didn't wash the dishes last night because she was on her phone, and you got mad and you just sent her to her room, and so you did the dishes yourself. But now tonight you're going to take away her phone because she didn't do the dishes because she was on it, because you don't want to wash the dishes tonight.
Right.
So that inconsistency doesn't create the connection that you need to make to rely on the behavior.
Right. So consequences are necessary, but taking the phone for 5 minutes is a consequence.
Yeah.
And it teaches something. It teaches her that, okay, let's do one activity at a time. The phone is interfering. So we take the phone for a few minutes. You do your chore, you get your phone back. That teaches the child something without anger, without animosity, without adversity. And the child learns the lesson. Very simple. So the alternative to this sort of half-baked response cost that the parents are using, the alternative is what you shouldn't do. Don't just react.
Right.
Don't use any technique when you're angry or there's a lot of emotion in the room. That's not a time to use these things. These are laboratory procedures, and you don't use them when you're angry. You use them in a very thoughtful, mindful way.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just punish. Don't enter these things with your children as I'm going to hurt you. Most of us have stopped hitting our children or spanking our children, thankfully. But now we're just doing emotional spankings, okay? Don't just punish. And then don't create animosity. Don't do things that create an adversarial relationship between you and your child. Because if you're angry with each other, none of these techniques are going to work.
Absolutely.
They're not going to do what you want them to do.
Right.
So what should you do? You should create a careful plan, not just a reaction.
Right.
And the plan should contain, okay, I'm going to take this, but I'm going to give this to teach you what I want you to do.
Right.
Okay.
So the important component there is the teaching part.
Right.
The content should teach something.
Right. And that, I think, is the most important thing. Parents invariably say, well, we have to have consequences. And our response is always the same. Yes, but the consequence should teach something. It should teach them how to do something that they're not currently doing, not just punish.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So instead of just punishing, you're teaching.
Right.
And again, I think that, well, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but remember what we're punishing is the behavior, not the kid.
Not the person.
Whatever.
Say that again.
Whatever theorist you want to go back to.
Right.
The idea is, the root of the idea is you're punishing a behavior, because punishment just means that you're decreasing the likelihood that the behavior will happen again.
I would underline that more than anything else is that you punish a behavior. We tend to think of, I have to punish my kid. No, you want to punish the behavior. You want to reduce. Punishment means reduce behavior. That's all you want to do. You want to reduce the behavior. You don't want to punish your kid.
Right.
Your child is the most valuable thing in your life. You don't want to hurt them.
Absolutely.
Okay? Nobody does. But we do want to change some of these behaviors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. So, things to consider as you're looking at a response cost. Again, the most commonly used strategy by parents, teachers, anyone working with others. There's a link in the show notes to an article that kind of covers a lot of this stuff. It's a well-written article with some good, interesting examples in it. So you guys will enjoy that. But I think that's it then for today.
We lost an hour last night.
We did. Your clock's sprung ahead.
That's right. Spring ahead.
So that means it's springtime. hot.
But here we are in middle of March.
Yes,
Put the time to put those Christmas decorations away.
at least.
Right. Time to take the tree down.
Unless you can turn your Christmas tree into some kind of Easter theme.
People do that now. People are doing that.
Yeah.
They just replace the ornaments.
I saw someone the other day, they just turned their Christmas tree into a regular household decoration. And so they just part of the household decorations.
My cousin has a birthday in March. You know, my cousin, I won't mention his name here, but you know this cousin. And he had a birthday celebration and somebody took a picture of him. And in the way in the other back of the other room, there's a Christmas tree. His birthday's March 9th, and there's a Christmas tree in the background. So I will delight in wishing him a happy birthday and a Merry Christmas.
Yes. It's best when you see it like that and there's still presents under the tree.
Yeah, how's he going to say no? How's he going to deny it, right? So happy March, St. Patrick's Day.
Yep. So,
the Ides of March, middle of March, here we are. March Madness.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.